First off, thank you guys for coming in and talking to us here at the Southern California Drone Film Festival, sharing your insight.
Yeah.
So I would like to start off. I guess maybe it's for everybody, and anybody can chime in since we have a group here on, what can drones add, just as a general kind of a concept and get conversation going. What can drones add to filmmaking and content creation, in your opinion?
Go, Zach.
I'm taking it. Okay.
Yeah, for now.
Well, I mean, we started this thing thinking that it would possibly replace tools. Like it would maybe replace Steadicam, or it would replace crane or helicopter. But really it hasn't done that, because it's not the same tool, and it shouldn't really be used like that. So it adds a dimensionality of aerial cinematography that helicopter can't get to, right? It could get closer to people without risking their lives, but not too close. It can, you could create some kind of like Steadicam to aerial handoff that didn't exist before drones. So it's not like it can do everything that Steadicam can do, or it can do everything that helicopter can do, but it blurs the lines between these tools. It can do that, and it's also developed into a quick boom up, or a quick dolly in, or something like that. So it's become kind of like this tool that certain directors or DPs use as a way to kind of get something quick that would have been difficult to set up a lot of dolly track for. Maybe they don't have the budget for all the dolly track, so they hire a drone to do it. So it fills a lot of spaces and blurs some lines too.
Evolving too, like what Zach's saying is, I think it started out in a lot of people's heads as, oh, this is a cheap helicopter. This is a cheap way to not have to rent a crane. And there's still, like, now we go on a lot of jobs and that's still what people want sometimes. So the ask is such a huge spectrum. So it can be like as simple as go in the sky and look down with a wide lens. And now it's evolving to, oh, you can do things with this that, like Zach's saying, can't be done with an arm car, can't be done with a Steadicam. And so it's starting to evolve as the technology and the pilots get better. Honestly, it's evolving to its own species of shots that aren't. It's no longer trying to emulate arm car and stuff. It's its own world, and it's the rate at which it's progressing is terrifying to keep up with, but it's very exciting.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I was going to say that, things are changing rapidly. And as far as technology goes, but even regulations and those kind of things. So yeah, it's just one of those snowball that just kind of keeps going. I have a question too, with you guys. Do you see that DPs and directors and stuff that are hiring you and working with you, do you see them, like embracing the drone shots more and looking for the drone shots more? I mean, because you think back 5 years ago, this wasn't really high on their radar, but now it's kind of, do you see them incorporating it in more, or is it still a challenge?
I think there's a drone on most commercials, most movies in some form, like second unit or main unit for a couple days, and then TV shows every once in a while. There's definitely drone used all the time, every day in Los Angeles, around the world. But it is, I mean, I sort of saw that as a two-part thing. Like, is drone busy in the film industry, and is it being applied is it being applied a lot on set? Was that the second part of your question? Is that sort of like
Yeah,
what
yeah.
you're
I mean,
getting at?
the biggest thing are they, because before you know, I've talked to some cinematographers and stuff, and you know, they're focused on the story. You know, they're focused on how to tell the story best visually, and trying to get that aspect. So they're thinking, you know, kind of training their brain that they have this added tool, this added dimension that they can add to it
Yeah.
instead of just ground level, that they, you know, they don't have to rent that helicopter. They don't have to think too outside the box. Is that, like I was saying, is that something that you guys are seeing?
I was smirking a little bit because we've had an experience before where we've shown up on set and been hired by the director, and the DP was not interested at all in working with us or using us. And then we've had situations where they never let us have a break. You know, like they just worked us all day. And it wasn't because it was just drone day. It was because we were playing with the other cameras all day, and given direction all day, and you know, gotten lots of attention. So it's like the range. It just depends on and who's hiring you and what the application is. But a lot of the times we find, like, once we start working, we never stop working. When they find that they can use us on something, they won't let us go. So
And it changes from
ridiculous.
director or DP to director and DP. Like there's some that like get to know us and know that we can do that. We're kind of, the thing we're known for is pretty tight tracking stuff pretty far away from ourselves. And so there's some directors that know that, and will utilize, will use that tool. And so as far as a storytelling mechanism, I think that a high, wide, and dumb shot is just as important as a chasing shot, depending on the story. But the thing that some directors realize with us is that they can hire the DIT who has a Mavic in his trunk to go get the high, wide, and dumb shot, and that's really cheap, and that's fine. And so a lot of times we'll develop relationships with these guys, and they'll go, "Oh crap, these guys can do this crazy stuff. Let's start making scenes around that, or let's bring them in on this day and say, okay, you're going to chase this car while the arm car does this, and this explosion happens." And so usually we're not used to our full potential on set, and that's fine as far as technical ability. But when a director or a DP gets a relationship with us and gets to know what we can do, there's such a cool symbiosis there. And there's a couple directors that, like, we're their guy, and so when there's a movie, we go on set with them, and it's such a fun relationship because, like Zach's saying, like, you wake up, you set up, and you're just like flying for 12 hours straight because you're just another tool. And in a lot of ways, those days are so much more fun because you get cool stuff, but it all pays the same.
You should also address, I'm never on set with these guys, but a regular comment I get from them in debrief is that they'll go into a project and the director will have this idea in their head about what's possible with a drone. And it's usually what we call high, wide, and stupid. And then on the way back from a shot, these guys will do something really cool. They'll notice and say, "Oh my God, we had no idea you could do that." And then all of a sudden the whole dynamic changes. They can't dictate how the shot's going to be run. They can gently make suggestions sometimes, but really you're depending on the director and DP to give you direction. And as Travis was saying, when there's a collaboration and when they realize that this is kind of an open-ended 3D tool that can be anywhere in space,
Right.
it kind of opens their world. It's like a, oh my God moment where it changes everything for the day.
It's an pivotal moment, and we love to see it happen. And there's in the outline of questions, there was one that says, what makes a good cinematic shot? And the funny answer to that is whatever the hell the DP wants. That's the good shot, is what he thinks. Even if it's a terrible shot, that's the good shot. And so I think what Howard's saying is sometimes we try to kind of nudge them to be like, hey, we can get 95% closer to this and make it a lot more cool. Like, we're not just a regular drone in the air. So yeah, I think that if we get used to our potential, it's so fun.
Yeah, and that's something that I was going to ask too, is the idea of effectively working with clients, DPs, directors, and those kind of things. Like, some of our audience, some of our attendees might be maybe smaller, looking to get into shooting some stuff, maybe some even just on a real estate level, and doing that. How we talked about the idea of, especially on the filmmaking, and these DPs that have it in their mind, this is what I want to do, and then, oh, I have this new toy that opens up a whole new world. But do you find that well, I guess it's a two-part question. The first part is, with with some of the DPs and directors that you work with, that they just kind of give you freedom, kind of a thing, where it's like you're the drone guys, they not necessarily put a lot of trust in you, but say like, hey, get me a drone shot, and or are they more like micromanaging kind of a thing?
That can range between the direction, just make some magic, and
which means,
the
by the way,
other,
no matter what, I'm going to be disappointed.
Yeah, right.
That's what that means.
Right.
Sorry, Zach.
You've done it wrong.
Yeah.
The other side of the spectrum is like we get some direction on the ground, and then we go up in the air and we set a frame, and they move us around inch by inch to find our 1, and then move us through the move to find our 2, and then our 3 or 4, whatever, to get to the end of the move. And we just repeat the move over and over and over and over again. And it can just be really, really specific what they're looking for. So it's a total range. But I would say like a good chunk of people we've worked with let us kind of freestyle and find a good shot. And and a lot of times, especially with cutting these days, it'll just last for like a couple seconds, and what they're looking for should just be cool, cool looking stuff. Like, especially in commercials, like, you've done when you're freestyling and you hear like, ooh, that's nice, or, oh,
Yeah.
Good job, guys.
Right.
That you've got a good moment for them in there. So hopefully the script supervisor's around to circle that take. But yeah, that's kind of the range we find.
Well, and usually too, by the time you're allowed to freestyle or go out and do whatever you want, that means you've already got the shot. That means that whatever they wanted, whatever the agency wanted, the people over the director's heads, not over their heads, but the people that they're working for, if they're satisfied with what they got, and that means you did a good job, and you can go screw around and just add some frosting on top of the cake.
Yeah, that's
true.
I was gonna say that's always good. Now, what are there any tips to kind of effectively work with DPs and directors, and a lot of patience, kind of a thing?
Yeah, just be respectful and introduce yourself in the morning. Go find them, and don't be afraid to go find them wherever they are. Don't interrupt them, but like, choose your moment, go and find them, look them in the eye, shake their hand, or in COVID times, bump elbows,
or awkwardly not decide if it's a shake or a pump, or
just
that moment,
go for a hug.
Offer both.
Yeah,
go to both of them. And listen very carefully, and if you have to take notes, because some of these directors and some of these DPs speak a language, and sometimes shout a language that you can't like understand. So you just have to write everything down, even if it's incoherent, and remember it. Go up to them with your partner. Like, if you're the camera operator, go up to them with your pilot, vice versa, or your tech if somebody else is not available, and go and interpret the language and see if you both walk away with the same idea in mind. Like, Corey and I sometimes will go up and ask, one of the creatives a question, and we'll both have completely different interpretations of it, and go, uh-oh, we really need to figure out what they meant by that. So communication is really, really, really important with those folks.
Yeah. And it's very important. I mean, if you're new to going on set, it's important to be very deferential to people above you, and never suggest anything unless you have a really good relationship with the person. Because even if there's a better shot available, if like we're shooting into front light and it's just ugly, and it'd be so much better if it was behind it. Nope, don't do it.
Yeah,
what he wants, and then he'll come to that conclusion on his own. But you can nudge a little bit once you get to know him. But be deferential.
Yeah, being deferential is important, and even using weird political language to kind of go out of your way to be deferential, like to say, I noticed that you said to approach the shot this way. Are you looking for this sort of thing? To kind of position it as if it's them writing the story, even though you may be looking for specifics on what they need. So if you're seeking clarity on something, be deferential and ingratiating to them and try to just get them to be more specific
Yeah.
with you on their vision. And that
it's
can
so
be
different from person to person.
there's a really weird political language to be spoken. Hey, Corey.
You're muted, bottom left.
Hey.
Corey of 2020.
I know that's all the whole "you're muted" kind of a conversation. So, hi, thanks for joining us. We are we're just right now, I said, talking about right now working with DPs and directors and those kind of things and tips and stuff on how aerial cinematographers and drone companies can work with effectively work with some of these directors and DPs. But I want to get more into like the skills, because some of the attendees will be aspiring filmmakers and aerial cinematographers. They have their 107, they're out there flying around, and maybe they're finishing film school or something like that, and they really want to get into it. But what, in your opinion, and this is kind of, Travis, you kind of alluded to this one too, I know situations dictate, but what kind of things make up a good aerial shot, that you're kind of looking for that sweet thing?
I guess I could probably shed a little bit of light on it, but I guess it's going to be different in everyone's opinion. But in my mind, what makes a good aerial shot is something that's you wouldn't necessarily say that it was a drone that shot it. It's something that is close to the subject, while at the same time not being possible with anything else but a drone. There's a lot of drone shots that you would see all the time that are just the high and wide, and they're necessary drone shots. They're necessary shots oftentimes to tell the story, to have those high wide shots. But I think what really makes drones shine is getting down low, going over terrain that you wouldn't be able to travel over with a vehicle, or anything else anything else that you could track with a large camera. You could over rough terrain. We did the Ford Bronco commercial back at the beginning before COVID, and I think one of the things that really made the drone stand out on that was that you couldn't really keep up with the Bronco going over rough off-road terrain with a large tracking vehicle, or with really anything else at the full speeds that you would want to go other than the drone. So it would just be being low to the ground and traveling at high speeds that is really exciting with the drones, I think.
And to piggyback on that, I think what Corey's saying, that it's from a storytelling perspective, they're all important, whatever the drone shot is. Like that's what dictates how important they are. What makes a good drone shot, I imagine, is what tells the story best. But I think what Corey's saying is something I totally agree with. It's some of the best drone shots that you've seen or that you can aspire to do or see. You won't know, the first thing in your head won't be, oh, this is a drone. You just go, holy shit, what's going on? This is a crazy action shot. And that's it. Like the best drone shots you don't know are drone shots. And coming from I come from the little drone with a GoPro on it world, where the coolest stuff in that little world is you're flying the drone, and the point is that it's a drone flying, and that it's neat in its own little aspect. And I think a lot of guys take that mentality to the cinema world, and it's just the opposite. You never want to think how the camera was being moved around unless you're a film nerd. But you want to, it's essentially, if it tells a great story and you don't think about what it was. And like Corey's saying, there's just a lot of stuff now that you cannot do without a drone. Like the Bronco thing is a great example. It was just that the whoops were like 3 feet up and down, and the poor arm car was tracking it, but it was doing the same thing. And so their top speed was like 10 to get anything good, and we could go 50 alongside of them, and it was very fun.
Yeah, it's sort of a new thing. I remember reading Stephen Poster saying something about this at one point, that at some point cameras would be like floating around on balloons and be able to just move in 3D space in any direction. And in a lot of ways, that's what drones have given us now is the ability to move a camera 3-dimensionally in any direction that you would want to go. So it's sort of just, you're floating around in 3D space. And you could make it very, very interesting. You could hover around, but it's definitely the most freedom in camera movement that I think we've experienced to this point.
Yeah, as what you guys are saying, like I know in my family all the time watching something. I'm like, oh, drone shot, drone shot, drone shot, and but I love it when you have that pause where you're like, I think that's a drone shot.
Yeah,
Right.
Maybe, maybe not. Yeah, because then it just messes with your head enough to where it's like, this is cool,
Right.
Yeah. Yep. True.
Travis, you mentioned something about small drones with the with the GoPros on them. So are you guys seeing, because we have there's a lot of discussion here in talking to people at the festival and stuff about FPVs and stuff. Are you guys seeing a lot more maybe demand or request or planning incorporation of FPV shots into the content?
Oh yeah. There's a huge kind of that's like the fad right now is essentially you take a Komodo, like the small red camera, and essentially you take a mini quad with a GoPro and scale it up to a Komodo on it. And it's cool because you can get a lot of very interesting, divey, really high speed shots that you can only get with a really high powered drone. But there's obviously limitations to that because the camera's fixed, right? So you can only, like a mini quad, you can only push a subject, or you can only, exactly. It's very cool, but it's limited. But what we're seeing is there's a lot of people that are saying, hey, we want drone to come work on this. There's 95% of this is conventional, normal drone work. And then, hey, do you guys have the little mini quad thing? Can you do this one shot? And if you don't have that, a lot of times they say, okay, we'll just find the people that do. And so it's almost a requirement to get on set to bring this thing that's borderline, even like barely professional grade, but cool. To be like, have to have this like tool now to get on set. And this tool didn't exist 80 days ago.
Sort of what these mini quads give you is strictly in technical terms, it gives you an extremely high power to weight ratio that hasn't been offered on any of the drones that are carrying gimbals. So there's a lot of shots that people would dream up of it's a high and wide drone shot where you're looking way down above a road, maybe at 200 feet or something over a road, and you see just a little speck of a car traveling down the road, and they'd want you to dive down onto the road and just take it right into a 3/4 rear full frame on the car from 200 feet all the way down to that. But when you've got a nearly 55-pound aircraft and you're trying to get a descent rate like that descent rate could very easily turn into an unrecoverable descent into the ground. When you're talking flying aircraft that has a 2-to-1 or a 2.2-to-1 power to weight ratio. But the mini quads have always had 6-7-to-1 power to weight ratio, extremely
11.
high power drones that can, if you've seen them fly, they'll be hovering there in front of you, and the moment they go to full throttle, they're disappear. They're just a speck in the distance because they're so quick. But there's some sacrifices that have to be made to have the drone be that powerful. And in this case, it's flying without a gimbal. At this point in the technology right now, it's flying without a gimbal. So you're limited to the shots that you can do. But at the same time, there's a lot of restrictions that are taken off, being able to do a lot more things than you would be able to do with a heavier, less powerful drone.
Yeah, they're like little Ferraris with cameras on them, But, But the idea with as you were saying, Corey, with technology advancing so quickly, it might not be too long until there's some kind of gimbal introduced for that kind of capacity.
Absolutely, you're totally right.
Yeah.
All right. So another thing, we've talked about this kind of indirectly and stuff, but what kind of challenges have you faced while filming? Maybe more on the technical side. We talked about the whole communication challenges and planning and pre-flight stuff, but what about what are some technical issues that you guys have dealt with, and have you gone about fixing those or troubleshot those?
I guess
never once. Everything is just totally seamless. Never had a problem.
Exactly. I know.
Yeah.
Great. Of course.
I don't do anything. I just show up.
Everything's perfect. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's sort of hard to even start somewhere, because that's really what the job has been from the beginning, is just sort of thinking of solutions for problems, technical problems. And
on the fly.
going back to the beginning, when we were starting off flying the first heavy lift aircraft, before Free Fly was selling drones, before there were really any commercially purchasable drones, it all had to be built off the shelf. And then it really was, it wasn't trying to figure out how to fix problems. It was trying to figure out how to get cameras to even be stable enough to shoot at all. So back then it was developing a vibration isolator, developing gimbals from the ground up, and aircraft from the ground up, to try and get them to work on set to the level that we figured the expectation would be at, given that it hadn't really been done yet. So, you know, I guess a lot of the things that we've done is we did develop a gimbal from the ground up, because one of the asks was to fly the 235, which has a lot more weight in the camera body, a lot weirder center of gravity that's further back because of the 35mm magazine that clips onto the back. But the weight is transferring while you're rolling camera in flight. And we had to kind of develop a larger cage, a larger box that we could mount the gimbal in, so that we could go through the full axis of rotation in flight with that large camera. And then all the electronics to go along with that too. So the different voltages the camera works at, the different type of run stop that the camera has, because you've absolutely got to be able to run stop in flight when you've got a 200-foot magazine and 2.2 minutes of runtime on the camera. So I mean, that's one example of it, but it's pretty much any time we're going on a job, especially feature films, where there's always, it's new gear, new cameras, new lenses that we haven't flown before, longer zooms. It's always trying to push the limits of what you can do with drones, because every time you do, it's very rewarding. It can be, but every time you're pushing the limits, you have to develop new technologies to be able to fly the new cameras and new systems. So,
and there's directors that know that about us too. So there's at least one guy that every time we go on a job, we have to build a new thing because he knows we can do it. So he goes, "Hey, I got a crazy idea. How about this little RC car that goes 60?" And we're like, okay, seen in 2 months," like that kind of stuff. So you kind of dig your own grave. But like, in addition to what Corey's saying, there's the normal, like aside from developing gear and solving problems from a design perspective, there's also the everyday putting out fires on set. There's just, I mean, flying a Mavic in your backyard, stuff goes wrong. But when you're on set, like set is a RF nightmare. It's just, it could, like, you can like every day before a job, we'll go test somewhere in a field and it'll be perfect. We'll have range for 3 miles and everything will be gorgeous. And then you go on set and you not fail safe, but you lose video link at 200 feet just because it's such a nightmare. And so it's a constant, oh God, what's the power output of this? What's the spectrum? Like, do a spectrum analysis of the area. Okay, what's loud here? This servo is acting up. Whatever. It's okay.
Always, that guy's got a transmitter on. Tell him to unplug it.
Tell him to unplug that. Yeah. What channel is that guy on? Get that guy back from the drone. We're taking off. It's a lot of technical challenges.
Everyone loves it when the drone guys tell other people to turn off their equipment so that they can do their work. That's really endearing.
Yeah. Don't text anybody. Stop texting.
I imagine you're making a lot of friends when that happens. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's another kind of challenge too, is that there's this thing, because since drone is a relatively new tool, and since it's kind of been dominated by younger guys especially, but especially younger people, is that there's this kind of this stigma with drone when you go on set. It's just, oh, here comes the drone kids. Like the amount of times we've been called kids, not necessarily in a mean way, but just like that's what people see us. Oh, here comes the kids with their toys. They don't know how a film set works. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, go ahead and go up. Oh, my son has one just like that. Whatever. So you're like, you're showing up with this sense that you need to like prove that you are good enough to be there.
And in a lot of ways we do.
And it's great to do it.
Every other system in the film industry has been there for 10, 20, 30, 40 years longer. And drone is very, very new. And being that it's pushing the boundaries so much in comparison to a lot of the other tools, it's riddled with problems. It can be in a lot of people's perspectives. It can be.
Yeah.
So,
And it's also, like we were saying at the very beginning before Corey got here, it's kind of pushing people out of their job, like not pushing people out of their jobs, but it's kind of, its footprint on what it can do is kind of taking up the space of other things. So it's kind of stepping on helicopters' toes. It's kind of stepping on armed car toes. And so there's some very understandable kind of baked in animosity there that, I mean, it's not like those guys come up and argue with us, but I imagine that that would add to any kind of already stigma we might have. Is these new kids, they don't know what they're doing and they're taking everyone's jobs.
Right. And my son has one just like that.
And my son has one of those DJI Mavericks.
Right. That
Mhm.
Maverick.
That Maverick is fast.
PGI.
That's funny.
Yeah.
But that's so true. So one of the things too, you guys, Astraeus Aerial your guys are known for working together continuously, you know, as a team, as far as you don't hire a lot of outside, you guys are like a core unit that kind of goes in. How does that teamwork and like the longstanding partnerships, I guess, collaboration, working conditions, how can you guys speak to how that benefits you guys maybe on the set or communications or those kind of things?
Absolutely. Yeah. So
Corey and I
sort
spent a
of,
lot of time together.
yeah, yeah. Way
And,
too much.
and then
We are all
and then we
basically
brought Travis in, and then we spent a lot of time with him. And you go and I'm just gonna wrap up this side story with, we've had a lot of PTSD together, so
yeah.
that helps to somehow make a bond between us.
Yeah.
So
It's
Yeah.
it's easy
Corey,
to, I think
you
we
were
get
saying.
along exceptionally well compared to most crews. But like Zach's saying, like when you collectively as a group get yelled at or whatever, it makes you as when the other guy is the bad guy, it's great because you guys are a team. And screw that guy.
When we started off, the equipment was really also specialty as well. That the amount of training in the beginning that went into it, I mean, when we started off, it was all special flight rules, flying from inside of a van in a cockpit off of a 6-camera array with an aircraft that had an overweight exemption.
An actual pilot's license.
Was manual mode flight only, full acro mode only, and weighed 65 pounds or 60 some pounds, with the large camera array and all specialty electronic systems. And it made for a system that required so much training that by the time we were all experienced enough on set to be comfortable with the system, the thought of bringing other people on to go through the entire training process, it would be pretty challenging. And it's changed since then because, a lot of commercial drones off the shelf you can buy that are much easier to use. But that definitely influenced it. And then when we started working together, Zach and I, pretty far back now, the language between us for when you're tracking a subject and the flow of communication from the director and the DP through the camera operator to me, with moving the drone, moving the camera, obviously every single time you go on set and exercise that communication, it's practice and it makes you that much better at it. And every time you experience a new challenging situation that's with a different style of subject, whether it's a car or a person, a motorcycle, something that's flying, the more of those things that you do together, pilot and operator, the better you get at it. And Zach and I have done a lot of it together.
Mm-hmm.
So that really influences us, working together all the time.
And something too specifically about the way these guys fly together is that most drone companies will have it's almost everyone is line of sight. So they'll have the pilot off in the distance looking at the drone in the air, and the camera guy, the operator off at the cart controlling the gimbal, and they're not side by side. They usually at least have a headset or something. But the way we fly is we're on a cart and these guys are standing side by side. And so the amount of chatter that goes between them it's just a constant dialogue of back and forth. And it's almost nice. It's sometimes like a DP will get a headset and we're like, just ignore all the talking. They're gonna sound like they're mad at each other, but they're not. They're just talking. But just it requires so much communication, and that setup of being side by side facilitates so much communication that it's just the amount of on the fly adjustments is pretty cool. What these guys can do.
It's like a pilot co-pilot thing. We share the load a lot of the flying and the operating. A lot of the flying that I'm doing is based on the information that I'm getting from the operator. I mean, all of the flying that I'm doing is based on the information I'm getting from the operator and the video feed from the operator. So it's really a very shared experience flying and operating the drone on set.
Yeah, and then the other thing that might be important to note is that originally the visual observer was just responsible for safety and keeping the pilot in the loop about possible obstacles and keeping the set clear. But in this case, Travis's main job besides doing that is to tech and free up Corey and Zach to work with that DP and director and not have to worry about it. The drone lands, Travis knows exactly what needs to be done to get ready for the next flight, and Corey and Zach don't even have to think about it. And they have the same shorthand there. They're able to, you know, just read each other's mind all day long, and it's very smooth.
And there's just
actually, this is kind of spinning off of the original question, but I mean, Travis also gets involved in the shot conversation too. I mean, like, especially if a director and a DP and maybe an agency person, if it's a commercial, are all adding their voices to the conversation, he can kind of like, you know, he can kind of like cut through it and maybe tell us like over our headsets, like what is the actual direction. Because, you know, triage, maybe there's some like confusion there that he can sense. So there's that added element to it, besides looking out for obstacles or giving us a heads up about some cue that we may not know about, because there's a lot of chatter going on. So like, yeah, and queuing is another thing too. I mean, all of us are involved in the timing of this. If Corey and I aren't able to accomplish the shot, it's also like Travis's goal to get the shot done too, because then we can all move on to the next thing and be successful together. So it's become a really interesting multi-dimensional communication from all of our job positions.
It's crazy how many people are involved in the drone flying on set, actively very involved in every decision that's made while the drone's in the air.
And that's when things are going well. That's when something's not broken.
Right. Because then that spins it out a whole other direction.
Yeah. It's a different kind of triage.
Right. Well, I guess my last question, just to get your guys' thoughts on this, is, you know, what are some things, you know, the idea of, well, we already kind of talked about what that happened, but what are some things that you see coming down the road? Like, what are some things where do you see drones going? Where do you see in cinematography and filmmaking, content creation, those kind of things? Where do you guys see this going? Because you've seen a lot of the industry grow. And so I just want to know, specifically with your guys' view, where do you see this going?
I'm sure everyone will have something to say. I could start. I see that, especially right now, cameras are getting a lot smaller. And that's been the case for a long time, but cameras that directors and DPs accept are getting smaller. So the Komodo is probably the first example of that, where it's because the cameras are getting smaller, the drones are also going to get smaller. And right now there's sort of a gap, I think, to be filled in the drone world. Ask any heavy lift drone operator whether they prefer to fly the Inspire on set or whether they prefer to fly heavy lift on set, and they're all going to tell you that they prefer the Inspire because it's light, it's comparatively much safer of a drone to fly. It can handle higher winds. It's faster. It flies for longer. The range is better. But all of that said, the picture quality is not as good as what you're going to get from the Alexa Mini, the LF, the 235, the Venice, all those heavy lift, and all the glass that you can fly on those cameras on the heavy lift aircraft. But I think right now with the Komodo and other smaller cameras like the A7 and there's just a lot of small cameras that are in development right now, and it's sort of the obvious direction it's going to go. Before the Alexa Mini existed, there wasn't really any great camera to put on the drone. There was the Red before the Alexa Mini. So, and after the Alexa Mini came out, it was pretty much every job we were always flying that camera. So as time goes on, all the cameras are going to continue shrinking down. So are the drones. So you're going to get much higher performance drones in much smaller, safer sizes that can be flown much closer to talent. I think that there's also a sort of a sweep right now of CineWhoop style aircraft that are enclosed, that are going to make it much easier for operators to get close to talent and tell those stories and get those shots that we were talking about earlier, where when you're watching it, you would never guess that it was a drone shot because it's inside of a car, it's inside of a house, it's flying through doorways and that sort of thing. And as the cameras shrink down, you're going to be able to see that kind of footage, that kind of, you know, indoor, outdoor, feet away from talent footage with high quality cameras, and they'll be in movies. So I think drones are just going to continue getting more and more dynamic and interesting shots with the technology.
To piggyback on that really quick too, is that since the cameras that are acceptable on big feature films are getting smaller and cheaper, in the same way, I think smaller, cheaper productions like music videos, indie films and stuff like that, their production value is going to go way up. So suddenly, if a nice drone package in the air and a crew went from being $10,000 a day to, oh, a smaller package, smaller drone, cheaper camera, $1,000, $2,000 a day, suddenly all these things are going to have drone involved because drone is just this cheap tool that can do everything. And like Corey's saying, if it's a CineWhoop, if it can be a steady camera and a crane, then in my head at least, it has such a large footprint of what it can do, and the gear required around it, the peripherals, the camera and the links and stuff are getting so cheap that it's just going to be ubiquitous at every echelon of from Wonder Woman to, you know, an aspirin commercial or whatever's beneath that, music video.
Mayonnaise commercial.
Mayonnaise commercial. Mayonnaise music video. My favorite.
Well, all right. I don't want to keep you guys too long, but I do appreciate the time that you shared this information, the insight that you shared. Really good stuff. So I appreciate that. I think it's beneficial for the attendees to kind of pick up on that. And
Yeah.
So thank you for your time. And
Thank you. It was fun.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.